At 2:17 in the morning, Malik Voss raised his right hand toward the mirror in the security office. His reflection did nothing. Malik lowered his hand, stared at his own tired face, and began counting. At exactly 2:20, the man in the glass raised his right hand. The motion was perfect, but 3 minutes late. Malik stepped back. The reflected office remained empty for another 3 minutes before the reflected Malik stepped back too. That was when the delay stopped behaving like a delay. The man in the glass walked to the mirror while Malik stood still. He pressed one finger against the other side and wrote two words through the dust, backward so Malik could read them. Turn. Behind Malik's chair, something took a slow breath. Malik had taken the overnight contract at Bellwether Center because nobody else wanted it. The shopping complex had been closed for 9 years after a fire in the East Wing, but the insurance company kept one guard on site while lawsuits crawled through court. His office occupied a former loss prevention room above the food court. One wall held camera monitors. Another held a wide observation mirror left from the days when store detectives watched suspected thieves. The glass should have shown only Malik and the cramped office behind him. His supervisor, Dana, had warned him that old screens sometimes froze and the building settled loudly after midnight. She had not mentioned a mirror that kept its own time. Malik watched the reflection instead of looking over his shoulder. In the glass, the delayed office still showed the moment before the warning. His chair stood empty. The filing cabinet was closed. Nothing waited behind him. Another breath brushed the back of his neck, warm enough to move the collar of his shirt. Malik grabbed the metal flashlight from the desk and swung around. The office was empty. The door remained locked from inside. When he faced the mirror again, his delayed reflection was not relieved. It was screaming silently and pointing behind Malik at a corner the real office did not have. The reflected wall extended several feet beyond the filing cabinet into a dark passage. Malik set his phone camera on the desk and tested the delay. He tapped the glass, switched off the lamp, dropped his flashlight, and wrote the time on a notepad. Each action appeared in the mirror exactly 3 minutes and 7 seconds later. The interval never varied, but the reflected room contained details absent from the real one: a second air vent, water stains on the ceiling, and the dark passage beside the cabinet. Malik opened the cabinet to check the wall behind it. Solid concrete. In the mirror, his delayed self opened the cabinet, then froze. A pale hand had emerged from the reflected passage and closed the cabinet from the other side. The woman stepped fully into the reflected office. She wore a red employee coat blackened along one sleeve and wet hair clung to her face. The real door never moved. No camera showed anyone approaching. She stood behind Malik's delayed reflection, close enough to touch him, but he did not seem to notice her. Malik shouted at the glass. 3 minutes later, his delayed self shouted too. The woman finally looked past the reflection and directly at Malik. She lifted an employee badge toward the glass. Even reversed, he could read the name, Celia Ward. Then she pointed to the office clock, held up 9 fingers, and drew a line across her throat. Bellwether's old incident files were stored on a local server. Malik found Celia Ward in less than a minute. She had been a loss prevention investigator during the 2017 fire and the only person never recovered. Her last camera appearance showed her entering Malik's office at 11:42 p.m. The next frame showed the office empty. Firefighters later found the door locked, the mirror cracked, and a bloodstain on the floor with no matching body. The official theory said Celia escaped through smoke and disappeared deliberately. A note buried in the report said the observation room had been demolished after the fire. Malik looked around the office he was sitting in. According to the file, it no longer existed. Dana answered before the first ring completed. Malik said Celia's name. Silence filled the line. Then Dana asked whether the reflection had begun writing. Malik demanded the truth. She told him to keep the lights on, avoid touching the glass, and leave before 3:03. When he reminded her that the office door was locked behind him, Dana said, "It only looks like the same door after 217. She admitted Bellwether hired a new overnight guard every few years because someone had to remain visible in the room. If the office appeared empty for more than 3 minutes, the building began correcting the absence. Before Malik could ask what that meant, Dana whispered, "Do not let your reflection leave before you do." Malik opened the previous night's archive. At 2:17, the real office on camera was empty because Malik had not started the job yet. But the mirror inside the recording showed a man seated at the desk. He wore the same gray uniform Malik had received that afternoon. His employee badge carried Malik's photograph beneath another name, Jonah Vale. The printed date was tomorrow. Reflected Jonah looked directly toward the camera, though the lens was behind him, and mouthed an address. Malik recognized his own apartment number. Then Jonah placed a folded paper beneath the keyboard. Malik reached under the real keyboard and found the paper waiting there. The note was written in Malik's handwriting. It said the mirror was not delayed. It showed the room belonging to the previous person who occupied it. Most of the time that room remained 3 minutes behind because the handoff was incomplete. At 3:03, the two offices exchanged whoever remained inside. The guard in the mirror entered the present. The guard in the present became the reflection and waited for the next hire. Jonah had written one instruction twice. Do not believe Dana when she says breaking the glass ends it. Beneath the warning was a list of 7 names. Celia Ward came first. Malik Voss came last. Malik's phone rang from his own number. He answered on speaker. 3 minutes of empty office noise played first. Then his delayed voice said, "If you can hear this, I am already where you are standing." Malik watched the reflection lift a phone to its ear. The voice explained that Jonah was not a stranger. Jonah was the name Dana would give Malik after the exchange, because records changed to fit whoever occupied the real room. Friends would remember Jonah. Malik's apartment would belong to Jonah. Malik Voss would survive only in old fingerprints and damaged recordings. The reflected man begged Malik to find Celia's missing badge before 3:03. It was the only object the room had failed to rename. The reflected Celia pointed toward the dark passage. Malik could not see it directly, but camera 7 showed a narrow doorway beside the filing cabinet. He watched the monitor while feeling along the concrete wall. His hand vanished on screen before it touched anything in the room. Cold air closed around his fingers. Malik stepped sideways, guided only by the camera, and entered a corridor his eyes insisted was solid wall. The passage smelled of burned plastic and rain. Framed photographs covered both sides. Each showed a different guard seated in the office, photographed from inside the mirror. The final frame was empty except for a plaque engraved with Malik's name. At the corridor's end, Celia's red badge hung from a nail. Beneath it, a bloody handprint had dried against the back of the mirror. Malik took the badge. The passage vanished, leaving him pressed between the cabinet and solid concrete. On the front of the glass, a fresh red handprint appeared where his own hand had been. The security system automatically scanned it. A police database window opened and matched the prints to Malik Voss. The attached report was dated 3 years in the future. Cause of death: blunt force trauma inside Bellwether Center's demolished observation room. The photograph showed Malik older, with silver at his temples and glass embedded in his palms. Malik held Celia's badge against the mirror. The reflected Celia held the same badge, not a delayed copy. For the first time, one object occupied both rooms at once. The glass rippled around its edges. Malik heard dozens of voices whispering through the badge, each repeating a different name. Celia placed her hand on the other side and spoke slowly enough for Malik to read her lips. "The office can change a person because records are reflections too." The badge resisted because the fire had destroyed Celia's employment file before the room could replace it. She had no official identity left to rewrite. That was why she remained trapped between versions instead of becoming the next guard. Malik unlocked the office door. Beyond it was not the dark food court. It was his apartment living room. The television played the program he had watched before work. On the couch, another Malik tied his security boots and checked the time. The scene was 3 minutes behind the memory of leaving home. Malik called to him. The other man looked toward the doorway but saw only his apartment hall. Malik stepped across the threshold. The floor flexed like glass, and Celia's badge burned cold in his hand. In the mirror behind him, Jonah stood from the desk. The reflected guard had begun moving toward the real office door. Malik's sister called. When he answered, she asked why Jonah was using Malik's phone. His contacts were changing one by one. The lease on his apartment now belonged to Jonah Vale. His employee portal welcomed Jonah to his first night at Bellwether. In the reflected office, Jonah opened the door and stepped into Malik's apartment, though Malik could not see him there. The television changed to a family video. Jonah stood beside Malik's sister at a birthday Malik remembered attending. Malik understood the exchange had started early. Names, photographs, and relationships were moving before bodies did. At 3:03, nobody outside the mirror would remember there had been a Malik to rescue. The delayed Malik seized a marker and wrote across the glass, "AT3:03, this side becomes yours." Beneath it he added, "The room with the door is the reflection." Malik looked at the real wall. The office door had vanished, replaced by unbroken paneling. The mirror still showed a door behind Jonah. Malik had assumed the glass copied a room that lagged behind his. The opposite was true. The office containing an exit was the present. Malik's room was the residue, a 3-minute impression left after each handoff. He had entered the reflection at 2:17 without noticing. The man in the mirror was not behind him in time. He was ahead of him in reality. Dana appeared in the mirrored doorway at 2:59. In Malik's room, the wall remained solid. She carried a fire axe and spoke to Jonah, who backed away from the glass. Dana had managed the contract since the original fire. Each time the room began to decay, she hired a new guard, let the exchange complete, and destroyed the records of the person left behind. She claimed this kept Bellwether from reopening the passage into the rest of the building. Celia shook her head. The trapped guards crowded the dark corridor behind her. Dana was not containing the room. She was feeding it identities so it would keep recognizing Dana as someone allowed to leave. Celia pressed the badge to the glass and forced a memory into both rooms. In 2017, she had discovered Dana stealing employee identities to create false insurance claims. Celia locked the evidence in the observation office. Dana started a fire in the East Wing and used the confusion to seal her inside. When smoke covered the mirror, Celia saw herself leave 3 minutes before she actually moved. She followed the reflected exit and entered the copied room. Dana recovered the evidence, but the mirror preserved the crime as a loop. Every replacement guard became another witness. Dana kept supplying new names because the room would release all of them if it ever went 3 minutes without an identity. Celia showed Malik the final rule by writing in soot. The badge could anchor one identity to the present. Malik could press it to the glass and reclaim his name, forcing Jonah into the reflected room. But Jonah was not an intruder. He was the version of Malik assembled from memories already transferred. Destroying him would erase every relationship that had begun recognizing Jonah. Malik would return to a life full of people who felt they had lost someone else. The other option was to give the badge to Celia. Her original identity would return, collapsing the loop around its first witness, but Malik would remain trapped when the clock reached 3:03. Dana ordered Jonah away from the glass and raised the axe. The first strike split the reflected mirror from ceiling to desk. A matching crack opened through empty air in Malik's room and cut his cheek. Behind the glass, the missing guard screamed. Dana struck again. Each shard reflected a different year. Celia during the fire, Malik arriving for work, Jonah living in Malik's apartment, and an older Malik bleeding on the floor 3 years from now. If the mirror broke completely, every preserved room would enter the present at once. Bellwether's demolished corridors, fire, and trapped occupants would occupy the same space. Malik had seconds to decide which identity the badge would make real. Malik did not press the badge to his own chest. He pushed it into the deepest crack and called Celia's name. The badge passed through the glass. Celia caught it in the real office at the exact moment the clock changed to 3:03. Every monitor flashed white. Dana vanished beneath overlapping versions of the room. Jonah reached for Malik, and for 1 second their hands occupied the same place on opposite sides. Malik felt the memories moving through him. His sister calling Jonah, his landlord forgetting Malik, his own childhood photographs changing. He held on to one fact the room could not rename. Celia Ward had entered Bellwether in 2017, and Dana had never let her leave. At 3:04, firefighters received an alarm from a building with no active system. They found Celia standing outside Bellwether in the same burned coat she wore 9 years earlier, carrying a badge and Dana's original fraud evidence. Inside, the observation office had returned to the architectural plans. Dana was discovered unconscious beneath an intact mirror. She remembered hiring dozens of guards but could not name one. Police found photographs of missing employees lining a corridor that existed only on camera 7. Celia remembered Malik clearly. No database contained him. His apartment belonged to Jonah Vale, and his sister insisted Jonah had always been her brother. Malik remained in the reflected office. The clock never moved past 3:02 and 59 seconds. Through the mirror, he watched Jonah wake in Malik's apartment, answer Malik's messages, and gradually stop checking reflective surfaces. Jonah sometimes paused as if hearing a thought from another room. Malik tested the walls and found the dark passage full of guards whose names had disappeared. Releasing Celia had weakened the loop but not emptied it. The office still needed someone visible. Malik began writing every lost name on the walls, preserving identities that official records had surrendered. For the first time, the people in the corridor remembered one another. 3 years later, Bellwether Center was renovated and scheduled to reopen. The observation office became a customer service suite. Contractors removed the old mirror, but every fragment reflected an empty security desk that was not in the room. Celia followed the renovation and demanded the glass be destroyed. The insurance company refused because one panel had already been sold to a private security firm. On opening week, Jonah Vale applied for an overnight guard position at that firm. He could not explain why the address felt familiar. During the interview, a mirrored wall behind the manager showed Jonah wearing a badge with Malik's name. At 2:17 on Jonah's first shift, the new mirror reflected his office normally. Then a bloody handprint appeared on the inside of the glass. The security scanner identified the prints as Malik Voss and opened a death report dated that morning. Jonah touched the print. A memory returned, standing on the opposite side of a cracked mirror while another version of himself chose Celia. The glass delayed his movement by 3 minutes and 7 seconds. When Jonah stepped back, the reflection remained at the surface. It was older now, with silver at its temples and glass embedded in both palms. It wrote one sentence backward, "You have MY life." Jonah remembered Malik at the same moment Malik remembered being Jonah. The names collided, restoring every transferred year to both men. The office lights dimmed. Behind Jonah, a door appeared where no door belonged. The missing guards stood in the passage, each holding a badge with a name the world had forgotten. Malik raised one finger to the glass and pointed behind Jonah. This time, the warning was not written for a man 3 minutes in the past. It was meant for the man in the room with the exit. Jonah heard the passage open and felt someone take his empty chair. In the mirror, Malik mouthed two words, "Don't turn." Jonah turned anyway.